Okay, let's talk about something no homeowner ever wants to think about: water damage. You know, that horrible sound of rushing water where it shouldn't be. It's an absolute nightmare. But once you find the leak and shut off the water, that initial panic can turn into, well, total confusion. So what we're going to do here is pull back the curtain on the entire restoration process, turning that chaos into a clear, manageable plan.
So just imagine it for a second. You walk in the door and bam, a pipe has burst. Water is absolutely everywhere. Talk about stressful, right? The stakes are incredibly high, and you feel like every single minute counts. But understanding what the pros do is your first step to getting back in control of the situation.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about what happens the moment disaster strikes. Then we'll look at the critical first 90 minutes. After that, we'll walk through the main restoration roadmap. We'll also get into why the type of water really matters. And finally, we'll cover what it takes to get the job done right.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. Those first few hours right after you find the water, they are absolutely 100% critical. This is so much more than just mopping up a puddle. You're literally in a race against the clock.
You know, water damage doesn't just come from one place. It can be a sudden, violent event, like a burst pipe or your water heater just gives up. Or it can be a slow burn, a leaky roof from a bad storm, or maybe groundwater just seeping into the basement over time. And then there's the one nobody wants to think about: sewage backups. Every single one of these needs a fast response.
Okay, this number you see here, 24 to 48 hours, this is huge. Why? Because this is the magic window. After about 24 to 48 hours in wet, humid conditions, any mold spores, which are just naturally floating around in the air, can find a nice damp spot and start to grow. And that's a whole new problem. So speed is everything at the beginning.
And hey, sometimes the problem isn't a giant flood. It's sneaky. So you gotta be a bit of a detective. If you've got a weird, musty smell you just can't place, or you see yellowish stains on the ceiling, those are major red flags. Same goes for paint that's bubbling or floors that are starting to warp. That's a sure sign that moisture is trapped somewhere it shouldn't be.
All right, so you've found the water, you've made the call for help. What happens right now? Let's talk about the first 90 minutes after the pros get that call. This is all about getting the chaos under control and stabilizing the whole situation.
And here's the main goal right now. The first people on the scene are not there to start remodeling. Nope. Their only job is to stop the bleeding, so to speak. They have to prevent the water from spreading and causing even more damage. And that leads to a really important distinction. This lays it out perfectly. Think of it this way. Mitigation is the emergency room. It's all about stopping the immediate threat, getting water out, tearing out soaked materials that are beyond saving, and getting the drying equipment running. Restoration, well, that's the recovery. That comes later. That's the rebuilding part, like putting up new drywall and making your home look like it did before the flood. So when the pros show up, they don't just start throwing buckets. It's a system. First, they have to figure out how bad it is. They'll use some cool tech, like thermal cameras, to see exactly where the water went, even inside your walls or under your floors. They'll shut down any safety hazards, like the electricity, and then they begin pulling out all that standing water. Okay, so the emergency is contained, the scene is stable. Now the real work begins. And believe me, there's a proven step-by-step process for this to make sure nothing gets missed. And here it is, the roadmap for the whole process. We've talked about phase 1, the emergency mitigation. Next up is structural drying, which is probably the most scientific part of the whole thing. And only when that is 100% complete can you move on to the final phase, the reconstruction. You absolutely cannot skip a step here. So what in the world is structural drying? It's way more than just pointing some fans at a wet spot and hoping for the best. It is a full-on science. The pros basically create a vortex of dry air. They control the airflow, the temperature, and the humidity to literally pull trapped moisture out of the very bones of your house, the wood, the drywall, everything. And to do this, they bring out the big guns. We are not talking about your household fan here. We're talking about massive truck-mounted vacuums, dozens of high-powered air movers, and giant dehumidifiers. And they're constantly checking their work with special tools like moisture meters and those infrared cameras to hunt down every last bit of dampness. All right, this next part is super important, and it's something a lot of people don't realize. Where the water came from completely changes the game plan. Because, trust me, not all water is the same. So the industry has these 3 categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think of a broken water supply line. It's basically tap water. Category 2 is gray water, so it's a bit dirty, maybe from a washing machine or dishwasher. But Category 3, that's black water, and that is the really nasty stuff. We're talking sewage or floodwater from outside. It's seriously contaminated and requires a whole different level of safety and cleanup. So, how do you know if the team you hired is any good? Well, that's where this comes in. Reputable companies follow very strict rules set by an organization called the IICRC. Basically, it's a certification that proves they know what they're doing. It's your assurance that they know how to handle every category of water safely, which protects both your family's health and your home's value. All right, we are in the home stretch now. The water's gone, the structure is dry. Now it's time to put all the pieces back together and cross the finish line. So how long does all this take? Well, here's a rough idea. Day 1 is a whirlwind: inspection, assessment, and getting the water out. But that drying phase? That's a marathon, not a sprint. It can easily take 3, 5, even 7 days of equipment running around the clock. The biggest mistake you can make is trying to rush this part. You have to be patient. And now for the big question. What does this all cost? Well, as you can see, the biggest driver is the water category. That black water we talked about requires a lot more safety gear and specialized disposal. After that, it's about the size of the area, the kinds of materials that got wet. Hardwood is way trickier than concrete. And of course, how much rebuilding is needed. Now, insurance, this is where things can get a little tricky. Most policies cover sudden and accidental damage, like that burst pipe, but they usually don't cover gradual stuff, like a slow leak you didn't fix, or natural floods. That's a whole separate policy. So what's your job in all of this? Document everything. Take pictures, take video, and call your insurance agent right away.
And remember, the job is not over until you say it's over. The very last step is always a final, detailed walkthrough with the project manager. This is your chance to look at everything, check the quality of the repairs, and make sure your home is truly back to the way it was before all this happened.
And just like that, your home is back to normal. The crisis is over, but now you're left with that one big question, right? How do I make sure this never, ever happens again? That's when the focus shifts from recovery to prevention. And that is a topic for a whole other day.